And I'm here today with my friend Mary Lou.
Hi guys.
We both have a strong interest in Kentucky authors. And so we're here to talk to you about what's new and great and some old favorites.
Yeah, and please don't turn it off because you see this huge stack of books. We have a lot of books here. We're gonna try to go quick.
Yes, and there's something for everybody.
Yes.
So
including all ages, because I'm kind of the
Yeah.
representative for books for younger readers.
right,
Yeah.
but everybody can read them too. So we
Absolutely.
Yeah, so,
Absolutely.
but the first couple of ones that I just want to mention are, of course, this is Mary Lou's personal copy of this because it's so popular that we can't keep it in stock here at the Scott County Public Library. So she's the Pulitzer Prize winning author, Barbara Kingsolver, and her latest book is Demon Copperhead. And it's kind of a take on Charles Dickens's David Copperfield. It's a child that was born into poverty in Kentucky, and it's about his growing up and about
I think drug addiction in his family.
drug addiction in his family and poverty and the foster care system and decrepit schools
And if you've never read anything by Barbara Kingsolver, her style of writing, it just rolls. There's just some quality to how she puts words on paper that is unlike any other writer. She is one of my top 5 favorite writers. I've read almost everything by her, and she's just fabulous.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it, but if you want to read it, put it on hold because it's so popular and we can't keep it on the shelf here.
Right,
So yeah, definitely put this one on your list. And then another one of our Kentucky writers that we really want to celebrate because he's the new poet laureate
Yes.
of Kentucky. His name is Silas House. And this is his latest book. I know Mary Lou's read this one. I've read it. It's called Lark Ascending. And the previous book that he wrote,
Southernmost.
Southernmost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good one too. And then another one that I just talked about on the last bookends was historical fiction, but this one is dystopian. It's kind of a dystopian future where kind of like groups of very militaristic people have taken over society and they want to do away with anyone that doesn't believe what they believe and live the kind of lifestyle that they live. So a lot of people have gone into hiding.
A lot of civil wars, like people fighting.
Natural disasters.
Climate change, massive fires.
There are fires all over
Right.
everywhere. So Lark and his parents have gone into kind of hiding. They become kind of in the wilderness, just living
New England, up in
in
New England. Yeah.
right? So they're living by themselves, kind of an idyllic life in the woods, and they can keep that up for a couple of years. They grow their own foods and hunt for sustenance, and it's kind of idyllic. They're growing up together with family friends, and Lark develops a romance with the young man that's the son of the family friend. And they're living together very happily, and then the fires come, and they have to leave because the fire just takes everything. So they hear that they can, if they make it to Ireland, they'll be able to settle there. That Ireland is the last country in the world
One of the last ones, yeah.
one of the last ones
Refugees.
still taking refugees in, and so horrible story of trying to get a boat to Ireland, and it goes from bad to worse and worse and worse. But he does finally make it to Ireland. Unfortunately, he's by himself at that point. But once he gets to Ireland, he has to figure out how to survive, and he finds some friends along the way. So.
Yeah, we were so excited. I have a book group here,
Yeah.
just a group of friends. We read books together, and we didn't think he would do it, but we invited Silas House to come to our book group and talk with us about the book, and we kind of we sweetened the deal by saying we meet in an Irish pub, Salancha, downtown in Georgetown, and he said, "Oh, I'll come to an Irish pub and talk about it." We had a wonderful evening with him. He stayed with us for 2 hours, and we just
Wow.
had a delightful time.
That is really really cool.
It's a really good book.
Yeah, so definitely you gotta put this one on your reading list too. Feel free to jump in if you want.
Okay, you want me to, well, let me talk about a Silas House book for young readers.
Oh, yeah.
This is called Same Sun Here, Same Sun Here. And I believe this is about at least 10 years old. And again, I'm just going to be really brief. This is the audiobook won a gold medal for one of the best audiobooks of the year. The way that it was put on tape. It's the voice of a boy who is growing up on a mountain that's surrounded by mountains that have been destroyed by mountaintop removal. The mountain that he's living on is now going to be mined and blown up. And his family becomes, even though they have a history as coal miners, become involved in activism to fight against mountaintop removal. The young boy, he's kind of a nerdy kid, he likes to read. And there's parts of himself that he keeps hidden because he doesn't feel they'll be accepted. He develops a pen pal relationship with a girl who is an immigrant from India. And she's living in New York City with her parents. They are very poor, as many immigrants are when they first land in this country. And even though their cultures are completely different and their life experiences are quite different, they have so much in common about what they're experiencing and feeling different and other, and many stresses on their family. So it's like this correspondence between the two of them. It's a delightful book. I have my own signed copy at my house. I love it. So I really highly recommend this, even though it's a book written for about like the tween kids, maybe 12, 13. I think it's a book that adults will also enjoy very much. Same Sun Here.
That's going on my list.
Yeah. Another one that is of a similar quality, and the writer is not originally from Kentucky. Her name is Mary Knight, but she lives in, I think, Lexington now. In fact, she visited our library for an author visit when this book came out. And it's called Saving Wonder. And it hits on a lot of similar themes as Same Sun Here. A boy who's grown up on this mountain. They don't own the mountain, but he's lost all of his family to coal-related. His father was killed in a mine. A sludge pond broke and the mountain was flooded with this toxic liquid, and both his mother and sister were drowned in it. So he's being raised by his papaw, and they find out that the mountain that they're living on is going to be mined, blown up, and they're fighting against this thing happening to them. So there's a lot of similar stuff.
Yeah.
Saving Wonder, and both of these books talk about life in Eastern Kentucky. Both of them are very good.
Wow, that's going on my list too.
Yeah, it's really good, really good.
If you haven't heard about a mountaintop removal, you should definitely
You'll
do some
learn a lot,
research
yeah.
on it. Yeah, definitely read those books. One of them books that I read that I really enjoyed was called God Pretty and the Tobacco Field. And this is by Kim Michelle Richardson, the same woman that wrote the book Woman of Troublesome Creek.
Oh, that's a good book.
Yeah, it's a good book. This one is really good too. It takes place in the late 1960s, and it's in a very, very rural small town in Kentucky, but it's more in western Kentucky. And it's so rural that the people never even named the place. They call it Nameless. Nameless Kentucky is the name of where she's from. And she's been raised by her uncle since she was very young. Her parents died, and her uncle has a tobacco farm. And he's very strict, very religious, and he wants her to grow up God pretty, which is his term for, your inner beauty over outer beauty. He doesn't want her to be interested in fashion or makeup or anything that would be a normal thing that young girls would be interested in. He doesn't want her straying from the godly path. So he wants her to be God pretty in the tobacco field. And he's got
Great title.
Yes, he's got her work in his fields, and she has a very close friend who is their families were close and grew up together, who is black, and his name is Rainey. And in the late 1960s in Kentucky, you didn't really socialize with people of different races. And she and Rainey have had an understanding since they were very young that they're going to get married someday. And they do love each other. They're good friends, and they want to get married. But of course, everybody in their whole community is against it. so they have to keep it secret. And her goal is to win the tobacco prize at the 1969 Kentucky State Fair. So she does all this work to raise the perfect tobacco plant, and she gets it there, and bad things happen. But the book is full of very wise depictions of what people were like back then, people's personalities. I really recommended this. The girl who's kind of narrating the story, she's only 14 in the book, but I think she's wise beyond her years, because she knows things that should be changed, and she's trying to work to change them, but she loves the people anyway. But she's gonna try to work for positive change. Anyways.
I like these books that show kind of a nuanced picture of some of the complexities of life in Kentucky and the social relationships.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to kind of move forward in time to a very contemporary novel. This is a novel that's been written for teenagers, and it's called Breakfast Served Anytime. The author is Sarah Combs, and she lives in Lexington. And I'm really sad. I was kind of, she's written 2 books, and I've got both of them here. Her second one's called Light Fantastic, also a teen novel. And she's not written anything since, which is a shame because she's a really, really good writer. Breakfast Served Anytime, I think most of you know about Governor Scholars. An interesting story about Sarah Combs is she was a Governor Scholar and met her husband when she was a teenager at Governor Scholars.
Wow.
And that's what this book is about. She's at Transy. It all has different names. She just calls it Geek Camp, I think.
Yeah. And
it's some unnamed university, but obviously it's Transy, and or Transylvania University in Lexington. And she goes. Her dream is to go to New York City with her best friend and be actresses. They both love theater, but she's gotten into Governor Scholar to study literature, and the teacher really doesn't do anything except read books and come back and we're going to talk. So they have a lot of unstructured time. And her class is really small because he wouldn't allow any of the students to bring electronic devices. Like, you can't be in my class if you have phones or iPads or computers or anything. And most kids didn't want to do that. But they develop a really strong relationship within this circle. But she also, when she gets there, her roommate is like sparkly pink, and Sarah Combs is not. She's kind of a nerdy, intellectual girl, and she's like, cheerleaders, no, pink and sparkles, no. And there's her roommate, and she's like, oh gosh, I can't stand it. Well, her roommate, she ends up loving her roommate, and a lot of what she learns is how not to judge people. Her roommate, her father is the head of a coal company, and they're very wealthy, but her roommate's best friend is this like model, beautiful young black woman whose boyfriend is a basketball star who's already been recruited, who's going to play for UK and live in the coal lodge where the basketball players live. So you start getting into like the author, the voice of the author is against mining, and she begins to understand more the economic base and how that is how people make their living, and it gives a much more nuanced picture of some of those struggles in Eastern Kentucky. But I love referencing the places that they go, and you know where it is, and I had a daughter that went to Governor Scholar, so we really love this. And then her book, The Light Fantastic, which was written, I think, in 2016, and feels even more relevant because it's about school shootings. Oh. And this is the day of the school shooting, and the characters, some of them know something, they feel it, that something's going to happen. And she follows these different characters as they experience this day. And this is probably the writing quality's even better in this than this. So she's definitely a very good writer. But she works at the Carnegie Center now. She's a writing coach. I wish she'd write some more novels.
Yeah.
Sarah Combs, she's just wonderful.
Absolutely. My next one is called This Close to Okay. It's by Lisa Cross Smith. And it's an interesting book about a recently divorced therapist who she's got a lot of emotional issues herself. She's kind of stalking her ex's new wife on social media, and she's obsessed with this new
that
wife.
does not sound good.
Yeah, well, she's driving home. She's a therapist too. She's driving home from her job and is crossing a bridge, and she sees a man who climbs up there and he's going to jump off. So she just pulls over and tries to talk him down, and she does talk him down. And he won't tell her much about why he was going to jump or even who he is really. He doesn't want to tell her his name. And she takes him out for coffee just to have a conversation with him, and in the course of conversation, she finds out he doesn't have anywhere to go, he doesn't have anywhere to stay. So I don't know if I would do this, but she takes him home to her house where he stays for several days, and they develop a friendship, and they slowly over time learn more about each other and their background, and how to be open and honest in a relationship, and work on some of their emotional issues. So I really recommend this one.
Where does, do you know where the author lives?
She lives, it just says she lives in Kentucky.
Okay.
So, yeah. I recommend it. It's very, very good. There is a romantic element to it, but I wouldn't characterize it as a romance. Yeah, it's more about just relationships in general. But it's very good. I recommend it.
The next book I'm going to talk about, she is not a Kentucky author, Lisa Lewis Tyre, but this book takes place in both Lexington and Eastern Kentucky, so I felt like it was a relevant one. I think she grew up in Tennessee and now lives in Georgia. And this is another author. She's fabulous, and she's not written anything in quite a few years. But anyway, Hope in the Holler. I read this book. I had just finished reading one book. It was night, like 10 o'clock at night, and I wasn't quite ready to go to sleep. And I thought, well, I'm just going to start another book and read like 10 pages of it, and I'll fall asleep. I closed this book at 2 o'clock in the morning when I finished it. I put it down. I didn't mean to do that. I usually like a little break between, like at least a day between two books. But anyway, this book, I've recommended it to so many people, and it reads young, and yet I think any adult this adult thoroughly enjoyed it. Oh, it's so good. And it really, this girl, I can't remember her name. Wavy is her name, and she lives with her mother, a single mother. She's never known who her father was. He's never been in the picture. And her mother works at Walmart, and they live in a trailer park. They're very poor, but it's a beautiful community of people that kind of take care of each other and support each other in the trailer park. And her mother gets cancer and dies. And in the process of that dying, she knows she's going to die. The community's kind of taking care of her, and her mother put everything in place for Wavy to be taken care of. She is going to be put in foster care, but she's worked with the social worker to be sure she gets a good placement. And then they're at the funeral, and the social worker is going to take her to a placement. Well, this woman comes running into at the funeral and says, that's my niece. I'm going to take her. And it's this sister that she had heard of. Wavy had heard of her, but her mother didn't have anything to do with her. And she finds herself getting driven off to Eastern Kentucky and taken to the very back end of a holler to a kind of a shacky house that's the yard is full of broken down vehicles and garbage, and there's a husband living on disability and a really mean teenage son. And basically what Wavy figures out pretty quickly is they've taken her because they want her Social Security check, and they want her to be their maid. And so she has to clean the house and do all this stuff, and they basically Wavy outgrows her clothes and her shoes, but they won't buy her anything, but they've got new TVs and new cell phones. It's a mess, and she's really trapped. But she makes friends with the other kids in the holler, and there's a boy nearby that becomes like her best friend that lives with his grandma, his mama, because his mother's in prison for drugs. Wow. And he has one pair of sweatpants, and he bathes in a bucket. Their electricity's been turned off, but the grandmother's so loving, and she's trying to raise him the best she can. And then the family at the front of the holler, it's a Mexican family that's immigrated to the United States, and they have a Mexican restaurant that's thriving, and they have a double wide trailer they're the most prosperous in the holler. And the mother kind of takes in these kids and feeds them, and so it's you see the different things that feed into extreme poverty in
Right.
Eastern Kentucky, and how hard the life is with imprisonment and drugs. I loved Wadey. She's so great. And she, kind of peels back some of her family. She finds some things in the holler, some clues and people that she learns about her mother's past. But you will not have a tissue left in your box
Wow.
if you read this book. It's just beautiful. Hope in the Holler by Lisa Lewis Tired.
Oh, wow.
Lovely, lovely book.
Wow. Okay, well, we wouldn't be able to talk about Kentucky authors without mentioning Richard Taylor. He's one of the former
I don't know
poet
him.
laureates.
Oh my gosh.
He's one of the former poet laureates of Kentucky. And he's also a friend of Bob's. So,
Okay.
so Bob said, you gotta mention Richard. So yes, I've got, this is one of my favorite books that Richard has written. It's all about the Elkhorn, and we have it in our Kentucky room. So it's a nonfiction, and it's part memoir and part historical discussion of the Elkhorn. And I really super recommend this book. It's subtitled Evolution of a Kentucky Landscape. And he's got an old farmhouse that he lives in, and has watched for decades the area and how it's changed. And,
Nice.
but this is one of his novels. It's called Sue Mundy, a novel of the Civil War, and it's based on an actual true story that I only just picked up this novel, so I can't wait to read it. But it's about a man this is in the Civil War, who he's in the Confederate Army, and he gets captured. He's a Union prisoner of war, and then he escapes from that, and he ends up in John Hunt Morgan's band of brigands that run rampant across Kentucky. And because this guy, whose name is, I think his name is Jerome Clark, but his name's Jerome, but they pronounce it Jerome. Because he's kind of young, and he has long hair, and he has a clean-shaven face, when the eyewitnesses have seen him with this band of brigands, they assumed he was a woman. Mm-hmm. So a journalist says, well, I'm going to embarrass the Union by writing this story about how this woman is doing all these things. And so they make up this character called Sue Mundy.
Oh, that sounds
and say that Jerem is this Sue Mundy. And definitely fascinating. Now I can't wait to read it.
Yeah.
So check it out.
Well, one of my favorite tween novels last year is called In the Key of Us by Mariama Lockingham. And Mariama Lockingham she works in the education department at the University of Kentucky. This is her second novel. Her first one was called Black Girls Like Us. And that novel was about, based on her experiences she is a black woman who was adopted as a child into a white family. And she just did an author visit at Georgetown Middle School this past week. I saw it in the newspaper. Wow. Where she talked about that particular book. Yeah. This book, In the Key of Us, won a Stonewall Award, which is an award that's given to books for children and teens that have LGBTQ issues in them. And this book, that's part of it. It's kind of a small part of the book. There is a budding romance that occurs between these two girls, but it's really an interesting character study. The main character, her name is Andy. She's 13, and her mother, she was raised by a single mother. Her mother always intended to be single, and we don't know anything about kind of her origins, but her mother was an artist, and Andy is a trumpet player, and she taught Andy about developing your voice and your expressing yourself through your art form. Her mother was a real free spirit, kind of part of what Andy goes, and she's died, she's been killed in a car wreck. Oh. And they just had a fight, and so Andy's carrying a lot of guilt. And but she's kind of reevaluating the person that her mother was. But anyway, she's living with an aunt and uncle, and sent off to this prestigious music camp for the summer. And there she's only one of 3 kids of color. There's a boy from the Philippines that becomes like her new best friend. And then there's one other black girl they're completely different. Andy's like all wears black, you know, kind of gothy looking and very stripped down, like she doesn't bring any frou-frou with her. And there's the other girl, the other black girl who's very popular, goes to the camp every summer, and she's got purple twinkle lights and a purple sleeping bag and this kind of, you know, and but they don't connect until Andy's always learned to play jazz, like improvising. She doesn't read music very well, and she has to learn to read music. And so the orchestra teacher, orchestra instructor says, well, you two have a lot in common. Why don't you two work together, the two black girls, right? We don't even know each other. But they end up getting put together, which, you know, kind of, you know, eye roll. And she teaches Andy how to read music, and Andy helps her learn how to be freer in her expression. But it was one of my very top favorite novels of all the tween novels I read last year. It was a lot. It was my pick for the Newbery Award, but it got a Stonewall Award. It's very, very good.
That sounds great.
It is very good.
Wow.
I love it.
Okay, this one is called Blackberries, Blackberries. It's by Crystal E. Wilkinson. And it's a book of short stories about women of color and their lives, and how they every single one of them is a unique individual, and every single one of them you get the sense of who this woman is, and her loves and her passions, and what motivates her. And I love that kind of deep delving into individual characters.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm a really big fan of character, and the more details you can give me, the better. And how she just brings out the personality with the way she writes, without even she'll give you a little bit of detail, and then by the way that the person's expression is, or what they say, or what they're wearing, or how they're moving, will tell you a lot about them. And this is
a couple things about Crystal Wilkinson. She preceded Silas House as poet laureate of Kentucky. So she just stepped down from that position. She lives in Lexington, and she was one of the co-owners of the Wild Fig bookstore, which doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's very sad.
But she's just a real prominent person in Lexington.
Really awesome book.
Yeah.
I recommend it.
So one of my current favorite writers of young people's literature is Rajani LaRocca. And you can see there's a Newbery Medal on this book. She grew up in Lexington. She went to Harvard University, undergraduate at Harvard Medical School, and she's a doctor in Boston, a medical doctor. I don't know how she has time to write. She does picture books, she does nonfiction, and she writes fabulous novels for young readers. Her novels are so good. She's done a couple. This is one called Midsummer's Mayhem, and it is based on A Midsummer Night's Dream. It is hilarious. But cooking is about a girl that's trying to find her talent, and she's going to enter this cooking contest, and she ends up finding this book in the woods with all these herb things in it, and she cooks with these herbs, and people start falling in love with each other. It's her father eats some special chocolates. He's a food critic, and he starts eating everything in sight. It's all the magic of Midsummer Night's Dream, but while this poor girl is trying to figure out what in the heck is going on with her family. And I love in the back, when I got through with the book, the first virtual book bites we did, I did this book, and her chocolate chunk thyme cookies with citrus zest.
Ooh.
I made those cookies, they were so good.
Sounds good.
But my favorite book by her is Red, White, and Whole, which is a book in verse. You can read this book in 2 hours, but it has got a 2 years of life experience in it. That is just, I don't know how somebody writes a book in verse this short and gets so much in it. And it is based on her life growing up in Louisville.
Yeah.
Her parents immigrated from India. They worked very hard. Money was tight to put her into the best private school that they could afford in Louisville, where she grew up. And she was I think the only child of color in her school. She's very smart and a really good student. And what the book really delves into is holding on to her culture, while trying to fit in as a teenager in America and respecting her parents. Respect of your elders in her culture is so important. And she didn't want to be a disobedient daughter, but she also wanted to fit in. She wanted to go to the school dance. Her mother didn't want to go to the school dance. But you know, it's all of that. And then there's a turn in the middle of the book. Her mother becomes very sick. But it is just the most beautiful coming of age story. So delightful. And I've handed this book to many adults. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a book any adult is going to enjoy just as much as a young reader. Red, White, and Whole by Rajani LaRocca. We just put on our shelf her newest tween novel, which I think is also in verse, and it got checked out before I got my hands on it.
Wow.
So there you go.
Wow. Well, speaking of verse, I've got a couple of books here by Frank X. Walker. This one is called Buffalo Dance, The Journey of York, and it's all in verse. And it's about York, who was an enslaved person that went on the Lewis and Clark expedition. And it's about his experiences on that expedition. And it's all in verse. So yeah, you can read this in a very short amount of time. It's in our Kentucky room. Another book, Appalachia by Frank X. Walker, also verse. These poems are very moving and they're very good.
And he's also a former poet laureate of Kentucky.
We're getting lots of poet laureates today. Okay, my absolute favorite book is, it's not even a novel. This is a book of essays, and it's called All About Love by Bell Hooks, the late Bell Hooks. I've read the first chapter of this book, and I am a huge, huge fan. I think I'm gonna buy this book and give it to everybody for Christmas this year because, boy, she delves into what really is all about love. And she defines what love means, and she thinks that the definition of love in this book, which she is saying, love is anything that nurtures the spirituality in either yourself or in another person. And she's saying that it is a verb, it is something that you continually are striving towards and doing rather than a feeling. So, but she goes into great detail.
I've heard that's a wonderful book. That's supposed to be her best.
It is so good. But she's got a book of poems too, Appalachian Elegy, which are awesome. I am not a huge fan of poetry, but I am a huge fan of this book. So you definitely, it's also in our Kentucky room, so you have to check it out. But All About Love by Bell Hooks, my total favorite of all the books that I've read. I also want to mention, just briefly, we still have all your old favorites like Janice Holt-Giles and Jessie Stewart, and of course we've got a lot of Wendell Berry,
which I'm going to talk about in just a minute.
Yes.
Wendell Berry. So Wendell Berry has a huge collection of both nonfiction and fiction. I really like his nonfiction. I still think about the essays I've read, but I love his fiction. And this is my favorite. This is called Watch With Me, and it's a book of short stories about the long marriage of Miss Minnie Quinch and Ptolemy Proudfoot. And it's just a beautiful love story told in short stories, so it's kind of episodes of their life. I was telling Jessica about it right before. My sister gave my husband and me, there was a little press in Eastern Kentucky Western Kentucky called Larkspur Press, where they still set everything by hand. Yeah. And you touch the page and you can feel the letters because they're imprinted. Yeah. And my sister gave us a chapbook which is a little book type, hand type set of the first chapter where they come together as a couple. And my husband and I, she was babysitting for us. Our kids were little then, we didn't get out much. We went out for coffee and we read the book to each other, and we were just laughing and crying through the whole thing. And it's a sweet story without being cloying, like there's some sweet books that are just like they feel like they're coated with sugar. And that this is, they go through the Depression, and their life is a bit of a struggle, but the love that undergirds it all is just beautiful. Love it.
Yep. And Kentucky, it's all about love.
Yes.
Yes. So, do you have
I have one last one. I wanted to put in some fantasy. This book is called Seraphina, and it's by Rachel Hartman. Rachel Hartman does not live in Kentucky anymore. She grew up in Lexington. She lives in Canada now. But this book won the gold medal for the Morris Award, which is an award given to a teen book by a debut author. So it was considered the best debut author, but debut book of the year. And it was funny, she was visiting her parents in Lexington right after she won the Morris Award. And she called up Joseph Beth and said, I'm in town, would you like me to do a signing? They said, well, sure, come on. And I found out about it through a patron, and I went. And I think Tyler went with me.
Yeah.
They had about 5 chairs out. And people just started flooding in, and they had to keep pulling in all these chairs and chairs and chairs because people were already reading the book. It was so hot. It's a book about dragons. It's a great fantasy. And this is a book she began working on as a teenager. So it's like this richly realized world because she'd been illustrating it and writing about this world of dragons for probably 10 or 15 years before she wrote it. And it's the main character, Seraphina, her father married a dragon unbeknownst to him because dragons can take human form. Okay. Dragons don't feel a human emotion unless they become humans. And the mother dragon fell in love with this human when she was in human form, and it wasn't until they were married and had a child that he found out she was really a dragon.
Wow.
But that it's illegal, they would be banished. And her mother died giving birth to her, so she's been raised by her father, and she's got scales that she has to keep hidden, but she's taken to the court because she's this great musician. She ends up falling in love with the fiance of the princess. And they're celebrating this peace treaty with the dragons, but everybody's like, there's all this prejudice that a lot of dragons hate humans and humans hate the dragons, and they're afraid there's going to be another war breaking out. But anyway, it's just a beautifully complex, realized world. A lot of people are reading The Priory of the Orange Tree, which is very popular. This is much better. And it's a duology. There's a part 2 as well. So anyway, Seraphina by Rachel Hartman, fabulous writer.
Yes, and you could get all of these and much more.
Yes, at the Scott
County Public Library.
There's so many more other Kentucky authors. I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
We just have scratched the surface, but that's all we have time for today.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's all good.
Yeah. So come and see us at the Scott County Public Library, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.